The slow unraveling of a life doesn't burst forth with a deafening roar. It seeps in quietly, like water wearing down stone, eroding the bedrock of trust until fractures are undeniable. For Daniel, the moment his world began to crumble came on an evening that seemed unremarkable. As he waited for his wife Emily to return home, the hours stretched past midnight, each tick of the clock sharpening his unease. She had gone out with friends, saying she needed a moment to unwind, to catch her breath. But when the door creaked open at last, the sight of her stopped his heart. Emily stood in the doorway, a hollow version of herself, as if she'd been caught in a storm that left her undone. Her hair was a wild tangle, her clothes disheveled, clinging to her frame as if they'd been tugged by foreign hands. Daniel's gaze snagged on something that twisted his gut, a subtle sheen of moisture along her legs. The air around her carried an unfamiliar scent, a musky cologne that wasn't his, wasn't hers. It was a trace of another, a stranger who had crossed an unforgivable boundary. Words failed him, locked in the vice of his chest. Acting on instinct, he guided her to their bedroom, his hands steady as he helped her clean up, erasing the physical remnants of the night. The silence was oppressive, thick with unspoken dread that gnawed at his core. "What happened to him?" he asked, his voice soft but quivering, barely holding together. Her eyes, glassy and far off, avoided his. "It was nothing," she mumbled, her speech slurred with alcohol. I'm sorry. Once. I'm sorry." Those words struck like a blade, slicing through the fragile hope he'd clung to, leaving only raw pain. Daniel wanted to press her, to demand the full story behind her vague apology, but he restrained himself. Not now, not in this state. He swallowed the torrent of questions, the fury, the betrayal, and tucked her into bed, stepping away as the weight of the night pressed against him. His breath uneven, his pulse pounding. A part of him longed to believe it was a mistake, something that could be undone with time, but a deeper, colder truth took root. Something irreversible had happened, something that might shatter them beyond repair. By morning, the fog of alcohol had lifted from Emily, but the clarity it brought was brutal. Daniel hadn't slept, his mind trapped in a loop, replaying her words, the scent, the way she'd stumbled through the door. He sat at the dining table, the exhaustion of the night carved into his features. The photographs before him were not taken to humiliate her, but to anchor himself, to make a surreal pain concrete. A close-up of the marks on her skirt, a faint imprint of fingers near her hip, evidence he couldn't escape. When Emily appeared, still wearing the wrinkled clothes from the night before, her eyes swollen and shadowed, she froze at the sight of the pictures. "Do you even know what you did?" Daniel asked, his voice quiet, not with rage, but with profound, aching sorrow. Her face crumpled, and she collapsed into herself, tears streaming as her body trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean it." The word mistake sparked something in him, a flare of frustration. "A mistake," he echoed, his tone sharpening. "You didn't stumble into this. You chose to go to that bar, to drink, to let someone else put their hands on you." She tried to explain, pointing to the alcohol, her impaired judgment, but her words rang hollow, as if crafted to ease her own conscience rather than reach him. That realization cut deeper than the betrayal itself. It wasn't about him. Not truly. "I need to get out," he said, rising abruptly. He couldn't bear to watch her grieve for her own guilt, to sit in the ruins of their life. He left, stepping into the crisp morning air, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. The questions didn't relent. They clawed at him, insistent. Who was he? Why her? How long had this been simmering? Emily's confession, fragmented as it was, had given him a name. Nathan. It was enough to start digging. A quick search online revealed him Nathan, polished and charismatic, the kind of man who glided through life without consequence. But what hit Daniel harder was the realization that Nathan wasn't a stranger. Emily followed him on social media. He followed her back. This wasn't a fleeting, drunken lapse. It was a connection, intentional and ongoing. Then came the blow that knocked the air from him. Nathan was married. His online presence was a polished showcase of domestic bliss. Family trips, children's birthdays, quiet mornings with his wife. He had everything, or so it appeared, just as Daniel had until that night. The deeper Daniel delved, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was deliberate, desperate for the truth, even if it destroyed him. Daniel turned to Emily's phone while she slept. He told himself it was for closure, but it felt like chasing shadows. The messages between her and Nathan were sparse but revealing, light, playful, steeped in familiarity. Nathan had known she'd be at the bar. He went because she was there. It wasn't fate, it was planned. The truth shattered Daniel. They had both known what they were doing, had chosen it with open eyes. That certainty drove his next step. Nathan's wife, Olivia, deserved to know the truth, just as he had. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about integrity, about doing what was right. He grappled with the decision but ultimately sent Olivia a message, carefully phrased, requesting a meeting. She replied promptly, and they settled on a quiet cafe in the city, a neutral ground where emotions could be contained. Olivia was already seated when Daniel arrived, her auburn hair tied back, her expression calm but edged with curiosity. She greeted him with a warm smile, confusion flickering in her eyes. When she spoke of Nathan, there was a tenderness, a love, that made Daniel's task feel heavier. He didn't cushion the truth. "Your husband had an affair with my wife," he said, his voice even. Her smile faded, her hand shaking as she lowered her coffee mug. He presented the evidence, screenshots of their texts, photos from that night, a recording of Emily saying Nathan's name. Olivia absorbed it all in silence, her face growing ashen, her eyes glistening with tears she held back. When she finally spoke, her voice wavered but stayed strong. "Thank you for telling me." Daniel nodded and left, the weight of the encounter lingering like a bruise. What unfolded between Olivia and Nathan wasn't his burden to bear. As he walked away, a whirlwind of emotions churned. Anger, relief, a pang of guilt. But his focus turned inward, toward untangling himself from the marriage that no longer felt like home.